I found out my brother's fiancé had been telling people I was difficult about money 3 weeks before I found out I'd funded half their engagement party myself. My name is Renata Voss. I'm 41. I own a wedding and event rental company outside Tulsa. Tables, linens, string lights, the stuff that makes other people's best days look effortless. I know exactly what things cost, down to the chair. That knowledge is about to matter more than anything else in this story. Here's where I'll start you, because you need this before anything else makes sense. 2 years ago, my brother Simon signed a lease on a warehouse to start his own furniture restoration business. He didn't have the deposit. I did. I didn't lend it to him. I wired it. No paperwork. Because that's what you do for your little brother when your parents can't. And mine genuinely can't. My dad's on disability. My mom cleans houses 3 days a week. Somebody in that family has margin. It's me. It's always been me. I want you to sit with that fact for a second, because in about 4 minutes it's going to get twisted into something ugly. Simon met Devaney a year later at a furniture expo. Devaney sells wedding coordination packages. Ironic, given what I do for a living. And within 6 months she had my brother talking differently. Not badly, just upward. Bigger words for small things. Elevated, curated, aligned. I liked her fine at first. Genuinely. She was sharp, funny at dinner, asked good questions about my business. I had no reason to distrust her. Then they got engaged, and Devaney's mother threw them an engagement party at a private venue downtown, the kind with a rooftop and a $4,000 minimum. I wasn't asked to help plan it. I wasn't asked for a dime. I was just asked to come, dressed nicely, and not talk shop. Because apparently a woman who's built centerpieces for 600 weddings might embarrass someone at a party with centerpieces in it. I laughed that off at the time. I shouldn't have. Because 3 days before the party, Devaney's mother called me. Not Simon, me. Renata, sweetheart, I hate to even ask, but the florist doubled their quote, and I'm 2,000 short. Simon said you'd understand. Simon said I'd understand. I wired the $2,000 in 11 minutes, the way I wire deposits for brides who are crying in my office at 8 a.m. because their venue canceled. That's who I am. I fix the number and I ask questions never, because urgency doesn't wait for accounting. I should have asked. Here's why. That party was the best-looking event that family had ever thrown, and I stood at the edge of the rooftop in a dress I'd bought for the occasion, holding a glass of Prosecco I paid for, and Devaney's mother stood up to give a toast. "We are so grateful," she said, glowing, "that we could give these two the beautiful start they deserve." We, her and her husband, she meant. Nobody mentioned the florist. Nobody mentioned the $2,000 that had left my account 11 minutes after a phone call. I told myself it didn't matter. Family isn't a ledger. I actually believed that sentence. That night, on that rooftop. I stopped believing it 4 days later, when I overheard Devaney on the phone in my own brother's kitchen, laughing, saying, "Oh, Renata's fine. She's just weird about money. You should have seen her face when my mom asked for help, like we'd asked her for a kidney." I was standing in the hallway with a stack of folded napkins I'd brought over from my warehouse, leftover event stock, a gift, because that's who I am, and I heard my own name turned into a punchline for asking for nothing, contributing everything, and reacting with exactly zero visible complaint. That's the moment the story really starts. Not the rooftop, this hallway, because I didn't say anything. I put the napkins on the counter, said I had an early pickup, and drove home with my hands very steady on the wheel, and I opened my laptop, and I did the one thing I actually know how to do better than anyone in that family. I ran the numbers. Welcome to the channel if you're new. I tell stories about women who stopped being the free labor in their own families, and figured out, usually the expensive way, exactly what they were worth. If you've ever bankrolled a relationship that then called you difficult for noticing, stay for this one. It gets worse before it gets satisfying. Here's what the numbers actually said, laid out cold on a spreadsheet at midnight. The warehouse deposit, $11,000. The engagement party florist, $2,000. A small loan for Devaney's dress alterations I'd forgotten I'd even sent, $400. A caterer deposit for their upcoming wedding that Simon had asked me to just front for now, $3,000, 6 weeks earlier, still unreimbursed. Total, $16,400, moved out of my business account and into their lives in under 2 years, with a single verbal thank you and one hallway insult as interest. I didn't cry. I want to be honest with you about that, because I know some of you expect the crying part here. I didn't cry. I felt something colder and more useful. I felt the exact sensation I get when a client's contract has a clause buried on page 4 that changes everything. I felt like I'd finally found the clause. So I did something I'd never done with my own family before. I opened a new folder on my desktop. I labeled it the way I label vendor disputes, and I started collecting receipts, not metaphorically, actual receipts. Every wire transfer screenshot, every Venmo, every text where Simon or Devaney or her mother had asked me for money using some version of the phrase, just this once. There were, by the end, 11 just this once texts. 11. 2 weeks after the hallway, Devaney called me directly for the first time in the whole relationship. Sweet voice. Excited voice. Renata, so we're finalizing the wedding budget, and my mom mentioned, since you're in the industry, maybe you could just handle the rentals for us? At cost, obviously, we're family. At cost. My tables, my chairs, my string lights, the exact inventory I rent to strangers for full price, offered to me back as a favor I was supposed to be grateful to perform. I said I'd think about it. I did not think about it in the way she meant. Instead, I called my brother. Just Simon, alone, no Devaney on the line, and I asked him one question, the kind of question I ask hesitant clients when I need the real answer, not the polite one. Simon, do you know how much money I've put into your relationship in the last 2 years? Silence, long enough that I knew he genuinely did not know, not because he was lying, because nobody had ever asked him to add it up. That's the thing about being the family bank. Nobody keeps your books but you. What do you mean, put into, he finally said. So I told him, out loud, number by number, the warehouse, the florist, the dress, the caterer deposit. I heard him go quiet in a different way. Not defensive yet, just doing math for the first time in his adult life. Then Devaney must have walked into the room, because his voice changed, that particular octave shift men do when someone's listening over their shoulder. And he said, "Look, we can talk about this later. It's not a big deal," and hung up. It became a big deal 9 days later, at their wedding rental walkthrough. I hadn't agreed to do their rentals. I want that on the record. I told Simon I needed to think about it, and thinking, apparently, doesn't count as an answer in that family. Because when I showed up to drop off a birthday gift for my mother, Devaney's mother was standing in my own brother's living room with a printed floor plan, gesturing at measurements, saying, "Renata's tables will go here, and we'll need the ivory linens, not the cream photographs yellow." Talking about my inventory. In my brother's living room, without me. I stood in the doorway holding a birthday gift, and watched a woman plan the use of my entire business's assets, like I was a vendor who'd already signed a contract I'd never seen. Here's the part that turned my stomach cold instead of hot. I looked past her, at Simon, waiting for him to say, "Wait, we haven't actually asked her yet." He didn't say it. He just refilled his coffee. That was the real folding chair. Not a chair at all. A floor plan drawn without me in the room. assuming my things, my labor, my at cost, the way you'd assume the caterer would show up because you'd already put down a deposit. Except nobody had put down a deposit. I was the deposit. I said, very evenly, I haven't agreed to provide rentals for this wedding. The room went quiet, the way rooms do when someone says a true sentence out loud in a place built on nobody saying them. Devaney's mother laughed, a small, brittle laugh, and said, well, we just assumed, since it's family. I know exactly what you assumed, I said. I've been paying for it for 2 years. I set the birthday gift on the console table, told my brother I'd see him at Mom's on Saturday, and left. Nobody chased me down the driveway. That's worth noting, because it told me something the hallway insult already had. Nobody in that living room thought I'd actually stop. They found out how wrong that was over the following month, and it didn't happen with a scene. It happened with silence, which is so much louder than people expect. First, I sent Simon one email, CCing no one, with the $16,400 total itemized, the way I'd itemize an invoice for a stranger. Subject line, for your records. No demand for repayment attached. I wasn't asking for the money back. I want to be clear about that, the way I was clear with myself that night at the spreadsheet. I wasn't chasing dollars. I was closing a door that had been left open for 2 years, and doors close with documentation, not tears. Second, I called the venue Devaney's mother had booked, the one where I'd fronted the florist deposit, and I confirmed, politely, professionally, that I would not be providing rental inventory for the Voss-Whitaker wedding under any arrangement, at cost or otherwise, and that any prior verbal understanding to that effect had never existed. The coordinator, a woman I actually knew from the circuit, went very quiet and said, "Oh, they told us that was locked in months ago." Locked in, by people who'd never asked me. Third, and this is the part that actually broke the dam, I didn't tell my mother anything. I let the wedding industry do it for me, because in a town this size, vendors talk, and within a week, 3 different people in my professional circle had heard, secondhand, that the Voss wedding had lost its rental vendor over some kind of family drama, and one of them mentioned it, innocently, at my mother's Sunday dinner, thinking I already knew everyone knew. My mother turned to me at that table, in front of my father, and asked the question I'd been waiting 2 years for someone in that family to ask. "Renata, how much have you actually given them?" I told her. All of it. $16,400, 11 just this once texts, and a hallway conversation about my own kidney. My mother didn't cry either. She's not a crier. She put her fork down very carefully, the way you set down something you're afraid you'll throw, and she said, "Simon Alexander Voss, is that true?" And here's the twist you haven't seen coming, because I didn't see it coming either. Simon didn't defend himself. He put his head down and said, "I didn't know it added up to that. I swear to God, Mom, I didn't know." I believed him. That's the complicated part I need you to sit with, because this isn't a story where everyone's a villain. My brother is not cruel. He's just someone who never once had to ask what things cost, because I made sure he never had to. I built that blindness myself, one wire transfer at a time, out of love that never once asked for a receipt back, until it had to. Devaney, on the other hand, sat very still and said nothing at all, which told my mother everything she needed to know about who'd actually been doing the asking. The wedding is in 5 weeks. As of this morning, they still don't have rentals booked, because every vendor Devaney's mother contacted asked for a deposit up front, a real one, at retail, and there wasn't $16,000 of borrowed goodwill left anywhere in that family to cover it. Simon came to my warehouse alone last Tuesday. No Devaney idling outside. He stood in my showroom, surrounded by the exact chairs his fiance's mother had once planned to use for free, and he said the only thing that's mattered in this entire story, I want to pay you back. Not because Mom's mad, because I actually looked at what I let happen, and I don't like who that makes me. I didn't hand him a payment plan on the spot. I told him to come back when he had a number, his own number, not one I'd calculated for him, because the whole problem, from the very beginning, was that I'd always done the adding up, so nobody else in that family ever had to learn how. He came back 4 days later with a number. It was lower than what I was owed. It was also the first number anyone in that family had ever brought to me instead of asking me to produce one. I took it. Here's what I know now that I didn't know on that rooftop with the Prosecco. Being generous and being invisible are not the same thing, and a family that only notices your money when it's needed will only notice you the same way. Needed, not seen. The moment I stopped quietly balancing everyone else's books, they finally had to look at their own. If you've ever been the sibling who fronts, funds, and fixes, and gets called difficult the one time you flinch, tell me your number in the comments. Mine was $16,400. I'd bet some of yours is higher. Subscribe if stories about women who finally closed the account speak to you, because next week's story starts with a wedding dress that got returned, and the reason will make you furious.